Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, I'm grateful that you're here with us today. And before we jump in, I wanted to make sure that you're all aware that if you go to my website, pursuingfreedom.com, there is a free, fun, and easy 5-step guide to more referrals there, which is basically the cliff notes of the book, Pursuing Freedom. So if you're looking to ramp up your business by referral in 2020 or whenever you're tuning into this particular episode, then I would highly recommend you go ahead and download that. It's an easy 3-page PDF that can get you going on your journey. So I hope it brings you value. And with no further ado, let's jump into today's episode with Zachary Beach. Zachary is one of the owners and the chief operating officer and one of the coaches with Smart Real Estate Coach. He's also one of the co-hosts of the Smart Real Estate Coach podcast, which is an awesome podcast that I love and listen to regularly. He's also the co-author of The New Rules of Real Estate Investing. And his father-in-law, Chris Prefontaine, was on the show several months back, and he brought a ton of value to our listeners. Zachary's going to dig in a little bit today. I know that we usually bring on real estate agents that are buying or helping buyers and sellers in residential real estate, but Zach and Chris offer coaching and strategies around how to buy and sell properties without using your own cash or credit or investor money. And I feel like this could be of great value to you if you're a real estate agent listening today, because at the end of the day, the way that we achieve success in our journey is by being of value above and beyond what we get paid to do. And this particular strategy will provide opportunity for alternatives when a traditional sale may not be the best option or a viable option. So I'm not going to waste your time trying to muddle through. I'm just going to let Zach go ahead and tell us all about it, because it's going to be a really great episode. So Zach, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Aaron, thank you very much for having me on. I'm super grateful. I look forward to bringing your audience some great value.
Awesome. Well, like I said, we already had Chris on the show, but in case any of our listeners are tuning in today and have never heard of this strategy, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your backstory in this space and specifically how you help your clients and how this can be of value to our listeners today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking back about 4 years ago, I had zero experience in real estate. I was a bartender and personal trainer. And I just knew I was not employable. So when I got out of college, I jumped into those two venues in order just to make some cash and enjoy my early 20s. But as soon as I reached about 25, I realized I kind of reached the pinnacle of bartending. And I looked at my life and said, I don't want this to be that when I'm 30 years old. So my father-in-law, Chris, was in real estate for probably 27 plus years now. So I went to him and said, I don't know if I'm going to like real estate. It's not like I woke up or had this dream of being a real estate investor. I just knew it was better than what I was doing. So I went to him and said, hey, I'd love to try it. I'd love to see what this looks like. So on the side of doing those other two gigs, I just started making cold calls. So I would get a list of expired listings, which I'm sure all of you guys are very familiar with. And I would just dial on sellers and then have open, honest conversations to determine whether or not they'd be a good fit for us to buy their property by buying it on terms such as a lease purchase, owner financing, or buying the property subject to the existing loan. After about 6 months of doing that, it was April about 4 years ago, I dove into real estate full time. I know people are out there saying, probably was easy just jumping in there. You probably got a nice cushy salary and you got a spot sitting there waiting for you in a real estate investing, corp. But it was 100% not the truth. I only got to eat what I killed. So it took a little bit to get my techniques and skills under my belt. But, fast forward now, been able to complete well over 100 deals in the last, say 3 years. And, thankful for my amazing team for that. So it's just been quite the growing process, but real estate's been good to me so far.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. So talk to me a little bit about specifically what does it mean buying on terms for someone who isn't familiar, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, so let's start with I'd say the most common one, which is a lease purchase. A lease purchase simply means that you and the seller are agreeing upon a price. It's really more a specific amount of equity. You're then going to take over any and all responsibilities of their property. So let's just assume that there's a mortgage on it. So you'd be taking over the mortgage payment, so principal, interest, taxes, insurance. You'd also be taking over any and all repairs, any and all responsibilities. And then you and the seller will agree upon a definitive end date. And on or before that end date, you'll pay off the remaining balance of the mortgage and you'll give them their equity. It'll turn to a traditional sale. So that's a lease purchase from the front end part of it. And then we tend to use an exit strategy of selling it rent to own, which means that you would then be working with buyers that are more like sideline buyers. So somebody that is just outside of financeability. I'm sure most of your audience, being realtors, are coming across many people that for some reason are not able to qualify for a loan today. So those are great people because they have the cash, they have the monthly income. They just maybe need an improvement in their credit, or they need seasoning. I happen to have been one of them. I bought my house this way. I just need seasoning. I'm self-employed, so somebody just needs some time that way. You would then sell that to them, sell them the property at an increased price because they need time. You would then be collecting a monthly payment for them, and then you'd be helping them get to the finish line where they can go get their own loan.
Okay, so in this example, does the seller receive any payment at the time of closing on the transaction when you take title, which you do in most cases, right? You take title when you close on this transaction, correct?
So a lease purchase, you would not be taking title on this. It's, if you think about it in two different pieces, it's really a lease agreement or a net lease with an option to buy on and before an end date. So in this circumstance, you would not be taking title. To answer your question about does the seller get a down payment, I mean, that's 100% negotiable. I would say majority of our deals, they don't. Because really what we're providing is a better purchase price for them, or more equity in the deal. So sellers tend to lean more towards getting a better price than they do getting, a smaller down payment.
Okay. So for example, let's say, for example, their PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, is $1,500 a month. You're going to offer them monthly rental income of more than that, correct? Or are you offering to just break even on their costs and their overhead?
Correct. Yeah. We're just going to be taking over any and all responsibilities.
Okay.
Now, this is on a typical basis, right? Any of this can be negotiated in order to create a good deal. So, especially if there's enough room, let's say that $1,500, but you can get $3,000. Somebody has a really low mortgage on their property, but you can get $3,000. Now, are you able to negotiate where you could give them an additional couple $100 a month? Sure, to give them some spread, and then you get to make an additional spread on top of that. Yeah, absolutely. So nothing really fits inside a box. I just want to give you some typical scenarios.
Okay, so just to dig into this a little bit, so you're basically signing a lease with a contract to buy in the future at a predetermined price. And then you guys are going to go sublet that to a renter and place a tenant in the home, which is obviously not going to be you. And then that tenant would pay a higher rental income so that you would collect a spread on that over the course of the term, correct?
Correct. So, yep. So we'd have the agreement with the seller, a lease purchase contract or a short form lease agreement is what we'd call it, which gives us the ability to have equitable interest in the home. We'd be locking in a determined amount of equity. It's really important that everyone understands that as well, because you're not agreeing upon a specific purchase price. You're really agreeing upon, so let's say we agreed upon $200,000. But what you're really agreeing upon is the existing mortgage balance. Let's say for this example is $150,000 and $50,000 in equity. Because you're going to be able to create a lot of wealth in this business and using this technique by the principal pay down on the back end. Because if it's $500 a month coming off of principal every year, for every year it'd be $6,000. So you're baking in, every single year an additional $6,000 of wealth and of equity. So it's really important that you utilize that. I hope that answered your question.
No, definitely. So I want to circle back on, the specific way that you coach people to do this and how it is a viable strategy, whether you're a real estate agent or you're not. Personally, I think it's really important as anyone in the real estate space to be looking at creative ways to create passive income. And I know that that's part of the strategy with this process. So I want to dig into the paydays and whatnot in a moment. But I'm also curious, are you guys target specific types of properties? Are you strictly residential? I'm assuming strictly residential, but single family homes, condos, townhomes, multifamilies. Is there any kind of box that you try to stay in? Any type of property that you find to be the most successful in this?
Yeah, we tend to work in the single family residential. Condos, we've done some. It just depends. HOAs can be a little dicey when it comes to that, meaning some of them allow you to rent, some of them don't. So it just depends on the condo. We buy property down in, say, Southern Florida, which like every single house is in a condo. So you can maneuver based upon your market. We like to do, at least three bedrooms, because primarily our buyers end up being someone that has a family, or as maybe a first time home buyer, or so they're looking for the space to have family in the property. Does mean we can't do two bedrooms. Um, and then we have done multifamilies before. It tends to be somewhere between 1 and 10 units. Because then when you start getting much higher than that, then it starts to become more of a commercial property management type scenario. Not to say you can't do them. We have plenty of people out there that are doing them that way. If you're doing them, doing multifamilies, I would definitely suggest going more of the owner financing route. Then you take title on the property, and then you can manage it how you please.
Okay. And then I know that you guys coach folks from around the country, and you're located in Newport, Rhode Island, which I imagine is not an incredibly cheap place to live. So, does geography and price point play into where you target? Like you just mentioned, Southern Florida. Are you guys looking at specific geographic locations where the cost of living is maybe less? Like, is there anything there with demographic that plays into this process?
We're in so many different markets: hot markets, cold markets, flat markets. If you follow the system, then you're going to be successful. Now, it just depends. So if you're in a really hot market, we buy a lot of property in the DC area, which is a very hot market. And what you need to, and it's also a high price range. So we've done plenty of deals that are in 1 million plus. So it just depends on your exit strategy on how you're trying to sell these properties, because we'd recommend in a $1 million price range that you use an exit strategy where we call the assign out, which means that we're agreeing upon a price with a seller, and then we take it to our market. And then if there's not a ton of spread there because of the higher mortgage payment, you then just assign that buyer to the seller and create a spread. But also, if you're in just whatever market that you're in, you can certainly make this work. So it just becomes down to a numbers game in my perspective. So yes, I'm in Newport, Rhode Island. It's extremely hot market. We tend to buy property that is slightly outside of hot markets, which means if you're us in Newport, Rhode Island, I tend to drive into southeastern Massachusetts or northern Rhode Island, because where I am is everything sells right off the bat. So if you got to start looking for markets that properties are sitting on the market a little longer, because a large portion of where we get our deals come from expired listings, because 99% of the people out there want a traditional sale today. We all know what sellers want, right? They want all cash. They want a quick close, 30-day close, and they're going to be able to move on. But it's not about what they want; it's what they need. So if you start working in like expired listings as a lead source, then what they want kind of went out the window, and now you get to figure out what they need. So you're always looking for people that are looking for alternative options. We tend to find that in all markets, hot and cold. But if you're looking to make this a viable business and scale it, then you're going to have to probably go outside of a hot market in order to get the amount of deals you want to get done.
Well, that actually leads me to one of the questions I have for you, which is, do you find that this is because of the numbers game and the expired listings? I'm imagining that there's a lot of phone calls, there's a lot of legwork that goes into finding the deals to begin with, and finding the sellers that are willing to work with this timeline and all that kind of stuff. So, do you feel like this is something that most of your clients are dabbling in part-time as a side hustle, or is this something that you see a lot of your coaching clients are diving headfirst all in, because it does require an investment of time in order to get your ROI?
Yeah, so we have actually a large amount of our associates that we lock arms with are, doing this part time now in order to create the life that they want in the future, because they are still working a full time job and they're dedicating hours outside of that job. Now, I know when it comes to time value, it's really important that we hit on this as well, which is yes, you're doing some additional legwork as far as making phone calls. We're certainly not somebody that's going to teach you to spend tens of thousands of dollars like other niches out there in order for marketing and direct mail and all of that. This is definitely a people business, and we want you to hop on the phone and work with the people. But also, if you look at our average deal, and we can go over the 3 paydays, our average deal is roughly $75,000 all 3 paydays. So if you start analyzing that, like how many deals do you actually need in order to create that income that you want, or the life of your dreams that you want? So it's not that you need to go out there and do 100 different deals like you're in wholesaling where you're getting these minimal spreads. You're creating not only wealth now, you're creating monthly income and you're creating large back end profits. So deals that we structure today is paying us for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. So when you're dedicating maybe 10 hours a week and you acquire a deal a month, those start adding up when you start actually getting out of the rat race and start building wealth for yourself.
Sure. So one question I wanted to ask earlier, and just kind of to back up a moment, is just because I feel like it's important when we're talking to real estate agents who are listening here and they're thinking, how do I incorporate this? Like, they're already engaging with people that are potential sellers and also people that are potential buyers. And so there's an opportunity here for them to potentially dip their toe into this space with a little bit more ease than somebody who's coming out of the gates green or working a full-time job as an engineer behind a desk, right? So my question is, how does the quality of the property play into things? And let's say, for example, they meet with someone who wants to sell their property, but it needs work and it's just dated and it really just needs kind of a facelift, and they're not going to get the kind of money they would want for it now, but they could if they had did the upgrades, but maybe they don't have the money to invest in it, blah blah blah. And you figure out that this might be a good opportunity for you to do buy on terms. Then do you guys are you on the hook for any upgrades? Like, do you facilitate the improvement of a property, or are you looking for properties that are in pretty good shape? How does the quality of the home play into the opportunity here?
It 100% depends on the overall terms you're able to create with the seller, right? Give you an example. We just did a deal with an amazing high six associate, which is the highest level of associate up here in Connecticut, and they bought a property subject to the existing loan. So that means that they closed on it, they took title, the loan still stays in the seller's name, where they're contractually obligated in order to continue to pay it. So they have title. The property needed upgrades. It needed work. They actually went out and found a tenant buyer, so someone that just needs time in order to become mortgage ready, that put up a nice non-refundable deposit and now is doing all of the work in order to upgrade the property, because now they're going to be creating their own equity in the house. And while they're working towards getting financing. So what we did there is we sold this property as what we call, quote unquote, a handyman special. So somebody that just needed, somebody that's willing to put in the sweat equity in order to get the property. So you have options like that. I wouldn't say that's a majority of our deals. I would say that's more on the smaller end. A majority of our deals are going to come from nice move-in ready homes. When you look at it from a realtor's perspective, I was never a realtor, but I coach a lot of them. And the way you want to look at this is like adding another, feather to your hat, which is anything that doesn't fit inside your normal box. And you know what your normal box is, you know what properties you're targeting, you know what areas you're farming. Whatever doesn't fit inside that normal box, you have the opportunity to have other options where you can now become a one-stop shop. And you can also leverage yourself within the realtor community in order to become the term specialist. So anybody else that has properties that they can't for some reason sell because of functionality or because the seller is asking for way too high of a price and the property is going to expire for the first, second, or third time. They now have the resource, which is you, to bring you that type of deal where now you can craft up the ability with terms in order to get the seller their end solution. So to start thinking about properties that don't fit inside your box, and that's where you can become that transaction engineer and to create wealth for yourself now, not so you don't have to go get another listing. Now you can start getting a portfolio for yourself as well.
Okay. And then 100% of the time, you're putting a renter in these properties, regardless of how you structure the deal out of the gates, right?
So we put buyers in the properties. We call them tenant buyers,
Okay.
which is somebody that, so they understand and contractually, they're 100% responsible for the property. They're making a payment, they're putting up a non-refundable deposit, and they're working towards getting their own loan. They're not just renting the property. Like if the fridge breaks, they're not calling us. They are treated 100% as buyers. They just don't have their own loan yet.
Okay, got it. And then talk to us a little bit about the 3 paydays in a little bit more detail. You kind of glazed over it earlier, but I think it's really important for us to get a little more clarity on how you coach folks to achieve those 3 paydays and what do they look like?
Yeah, so if we go back to our prior example of the lease purchase agreement or the lease purchase, we call that a sandwich lease because you're sandwiched in between the seller and the buyer. You're the one that's collecting the payments there. So, all right. So if you're looking at payday number one is the non-refundable deposit you're going to collect from the buyer. It tends to be somewhere between 5 and 10%. On average, you'll collect probably between 5 and 6% down right at the official signing. And then over time, you then would structure more deposits that are non-refundable, that are directly linked to their contract. That way, when they get to the end of their term or before the end of their term, they're in contact with a bank and they can go get their own loan. So that's pay number one. That tends to be our average pay number one is roughly $26,000. Now, full disclosure, I mean, your results may vary. We have properties that all 3 paydays in lower end areas are roughly $50,000 per 3 paydays. And then like properties in like DC that are higher end, like $120,000 per all 3 paydays.
Okay.
Pay number 2 is the spread that you collect every month. So the difference between what you have to pay either the seller or the bank and what you're able to collect monthly from your buyers.
Okay.
And then payday number 3 is the difference in the premium because you sold the property at a higher price than you agreed upon with the seller. The difference in the premium that's left over that has been paid down from the non-refundable deposit and the difference in principal pay down. As we kind of alluded to earlier, you're getting the benefit of principal pay down. So the average spread on number 2 it's roughly just over $300. Some of them are much higher. We have some of them that have like $1,000 spread. Some of them are roughly right around that 300. Then the back end profit is somewhere in the $35,000 range for your back end profit.
Okay, so when you talked about how you benefit from the principal pay down, is that because when you go under contract with the seller, you're agreeing to the equity payout? So like, for example, if they owe $150,000 on their mortgage at the time of you writing the contract and you agree upon a sale price of $200,000, what you're really agreeing to is the equity of $50,000. So if the mortgage pay down is $12,000 over the course of the term until they actually get paid, then they're getting the $50,000 on top of whatever's left on their mortgage, and you're gaining that $12,000 additional equity from the principal pay down.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. Okay. That's a huge difference between what we do and some other people that do similar in this industry. Really important that you're getting that principal pay down. Number 1, it's additional profit, but also number 2, as we were alluding to offline, it's your protection from a down market as well. You have wiggle room there as well. So that's really important.
Awesome. And then my last question I have for you is, do you need to have any kind of license to do this, whether it's a real estate license or anything else?
Nope, no license. I've never held one. So you don't need it. If you already have it, there's benefits to having it. There's also benefits of not having it.
Okay.
Such as disclosures and things like that.
So are you employing attorneys in your local market to help draft the contracts then and handle the disbursements of funds and the collection? Or are you using title companies for, holding funds, escrow, or, what kind of third parties need to be involved in this process?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on what state you're in, right? I 100% recommend doesn't even if you, even if you're in a title state, that you still have a attorney that understands your agreements, because a title company is not going to be there to represent you. They're there to do a transaction.
Sure.
So I would always recommend you have an attorney. And then what we've closed many times with title companies as well. Um, when we're using an attorney, we use an attorney for a couple different reasons. Number one, to have our tenant buyers sign in front of, even though it is just a formal lease signing, we want them to understand the levity of the situation that they're getting involved in as far as that. We also use them to, yes, go through our contracts, and especially when we're buying property as well, because as you send out contracts, the seller may have their attorney look at, and there can be some negotiations. You always want to make sure that you're being overly protected. And then just in general, especially at the end closing dates when the title's transferring, you want to make sure that you're receiving your funds that are due to you at the end. So we have our attorney always in touch with the other two attorneys to make sure that we're receiving our funds.
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, I don't think 25 minutes is really enough time to give somebody a full understanding of how to create these opportunities in their own lives. But I know that you guys provide a ton of education in a number of different ways, and you also have your book. So, is the New Rules of Real Estate Investing, is that an in-depth exploring of this particular strategy, or talk to me about the book a little bit?
Yeah, so the New Rules of Real Estate Investing was our most recent Amazon best-selling book. It was myself, Chris, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, Nick, that all co-authored it. It goes in depth into what we do, but it also is going to cover other niches as well, because we have 24 leading experts that are in the field. So it gives you a really good understanding of just real estate investing in general. We're not going to tell you that we are the best option for you. We are from New England. We are so that just absolutely describes on how we are as our personality. But we really want you guys to be able to understand that there's ways to invest and to be able to create a portfolio for yourself. That way, you're not just running on the treadmill. As my brother-in-law and father-in-law both were realtors for numbers of years, and it is more or less like running on a treadmill. So we want to give you that advantage and that leverage. So it'd be a really good place to start. Once you, and we'll give you the book for free. You just have to go to the website, newrulesforfree.com, newrulesforfree.com. We'll ship it to you absolutely free. I like a physical book. So, and then what you can do in the meantime as well is I would take a look at smartrealestatecoach.com/webinar. We do a free 50-minute webinar where you're going to find out real in depth on all these different techniques. So both of those are really great resources in order for you to at least dip your toe in the water and determine whether or not this is a good route for you to go and add to your feather in your cap.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll definitely provide those links in the show notes for anybody who wants to get access to a free copy of your book. Thank you so much for offering that, by the way. And then talk to us a little bit about the different levels of access they can have to coaching and whether hands-on online resources, all that kind of stuff, because I know you guys have a wealth of resources available.
Yeah, I would say if you're at the starting point where you're just starting to dip your toe in the water, I would start with those 2 free resources that we gave you, because that will lead you into our online home study course, which is where every single person starts, whether they're an associate, meaning we're doing deals with them in the trenches, locking arms with them, or they're doing deals on their own. So that's the best place to start. We do have group coaching and individual coaching, which you get involved in what we call our Wicked Smart community, which is everybody we work with around the country. So we do have those levels, but start with the basics first and find out if we're a good fit for you, and then we can have an additional conversation whether we're both a great match.
Okay, awesome. And then the last thing is, I know you guys do 2 events every year. So tell us a little bit about those events. Where are they located? Do you have dates already lined up for 2020?
Yes. I'd have to go into my calendar real quick.
I jumped you, but they can find it on the website, I'm sure. But
yeah, absolutely. As soon as you go ahead and go through our book and our webinar, then you'll definitely be notified. So we do 2 events a year. If you're listening to this, and we're taping this here in December, the The one that's coming up is in April. That's our business scaling secrets event, which is definitely from like a micro perspective. We're going to be digging into, or we dig into case studies, deals, helping you be able to build and scale your business, both personally and within your business itself. And then our QLS Live, Quantum Leap Systems Live, is in September. So if you end up diving into our home study program, you actually get a free ticket to that event. It's normally $497. That's definitely from a macro perspective where we're going to dig into all the different pieces of the business and get you and your first initial steps. But it is something that people come back to year after year after year as we're adding a new content as the business evolves. It's most important. One of our core values is constantly innovate and improve. So our business is always evolving. We're in the trenches. We're not teaching things that were 10 years ago. We're teaching things that are now. So we're constantly in the trenches. So as things evolve and improve, then we bring it to everyone and make sure that their business is improving as well.
Well, I love it. And I hope to see you in person at one of the events in 2020 because both those months are open currently. And I've got family there in Rhode Island. So maybe I'll see you in person in Newport sometime in the coming year.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. I'll get you a VIP ticket and you can come sit in.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Zach. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Any other ways that people can follow you, find you, social media, etc.?
Yeah, the best place to find us are the two social media that we're always on is Facebook. So facebook.com/smart real estate coach. We do Facebook Lives. We do videos every single week and YouTube, youtube.com/smart real estate coach. We put out motivational Mondays, Q&A Thursdays, deal structure Sundays. So if you really want to see how we structure these deals, go ahead on the YouTube or Facebook as we break down a deal every single Sunday and teach you how we did it with either us or our associate. So two great places to follow and subscribe.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'm super intrigued by this strategy. And I know people were inspired by Chris when he was on the show. So I'm just excited to kind of have both perspectives from the two of you. And I just think it's really cool that you're doing this as a family business. So thanks again.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
All right. And for all of you guys listening, thanks again for tuning in. And if you've made it this far, it's because you love this content so much that you need to go onto whatever app you're consuming this content and make sure you leave a review. We are on a mission to increase our reviews to continue to attract awesome guests like Zach and help this content get found to help you on your journey. I appreciate you. Have an awesome day.